Hello, everyone. It's Matt Woods from First Alert 4, and welcome back to Backstory STL. On this show, I interview local people whose life stories have inspired them to make a difference in their community. These interviews allow people to explain their passion for meaningful work in a way that goes beyond the day-to-day headlines. My guest this week is a case manager at the Criminal Justice Ministry in St. Louis. He served in the United States Marine Corps and was a firefighter-paramedic in Ferguson and West County. His battles with alcohol and other drug use led him to become an advocate for others who have gone through similar struggles. A big turning point in his life was a car crash that nearly killed him and also took part of his leg. He recently testified for a bill to streamline the expungement of nonviolent felonies in Missouri. He's also a recipient of the Next Step Scholarship, which he is using to get a degree in social work from UMSL. Here's the backstory of Patrick Benson. Well, Patrick, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate your time.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for asking me.
So to start, of course, a lot of things I want to get into about your life. We interviewed you in, I think it was July or August, about the Next Step program. But let's start with, you were in the Marine Corps when you were younger. What made you want to go into the Marines?
I was always a high-level wrestler in high school, and my dad fostered that wrestling. This is kind of a funny story. And so he would never let me work a job when I was in high school for spending money. He'd give it to me. He was hoping I'd get a wrestling scholarship. And I did. And then I got that freedom my first semester in college, and I flunked out of it. And I thought, man, my dad's going to kill me when I get back home. So I figured I better get the heck out of Dodge and join the Marine Corps. Really, there was nothing noble about it.
Right. So it was kind of just something else besides college.
Right.
It was an alternate
college
path.
I already blown the opportunity for, and I knew I had to do something. And I always was interested in the Marine Corps. My dad was in the Army, and I was always super competitive, so I wanted to be better than him.
Okay. Did he approve of the Marine Corps?
Absolutely.
Of your decision? Okay.
Yep.
And so you spent 2 years in the Marine Corps, is that right?
Yes. Not quite 2.
Okay. As an infantry mortarman that
Correct.
you told me back last year.
Yep.
My first question is, what is an infantry mortarman?
Well, okay, so there's infantry. They have different specialties in infantry. There's an 0311, which is a rifleman, 0331, which is a machine gunner, and 0341 is a mortarman. All infantry platoons carry mortars with them.
Okay.
It's like soften up the enemy as they approach. So you're in an infantry company. There is a weapons company, which usually doesn't march with the rifle platoons, and then there's the I was with the weapons platoon. So I marched with my mortar with them, set up mortar bases, and then fired as we approached.
Right. Okay. And then so after the Marine Corps, you ended up becoming a firefighter paramedic and did that for about, was it 5 years, I think you said?
Yeah, 5 years. I think from 1999 to 2004.
And what, it was here in St. Louis.
Correct.
What area did you work
I started off as a firefighter EMT with the city of Ferguson. And while I was working there, I was going to paramedic school. And once I became a paramedic, I went out to West County EMS and Fire in Manchester, unincorporated St. Louis County, and Town and Country.
And so your alcohol use throughout the years, was that one of the main things that you said you gave that career up, or was it something else? I can't quite remember.
No, it was my alcohol. I wasn't really active in my recovery while I was working as the firefighter paramedic, and then there were some pretty traumatic calls that I had that if I'd been active in recovery, I probably would have been able to handle those calls properly, but I wasn't. I didn't have any tools. One of them was I ran when my daughter was 2 years old, I ran a 2-year-old that choked to death in her high chair, and when we cut her dress off, she had on Pampers premium diapers with Elmo on them, which are the same diapers my daughter wore.
Wow.
And like from right after that call, I just went down. I think within 3 months after that call, I tried white knuckling it. I didn't go to meetings. I started drinking.
Yeah, I mean, that
and
kind of
then
stuff.
Drinking led quickly to drug use.
Right, right. That kind of stuff stays with you. And a lot of first responders
A lot of
get
first
PTSD.
responders have PTSD.
Yeah. Okay, so you said you flunked out when you first tried to go to college. Now is the second time you're going to UMSL right now for
Correct.
social work.
Yep, I'm graduating this spring.
And so, what made you want to go into social work and go back to school?
Well, after I had a car accident in 2017 that shattered my legs, and so had physical professions my whole life: firefighter, paramedic. I was in the Marine Corps. I was a union carpenter. I was a professional kickboxer, and I knew I couldn't do that anymore. And I was on disability, but I didn't want to be on disability the rest of my life. And there was a social worker that was in Veterans Treatment Court that helped me with getting housing and everything else, and just like really was a bright spot in the dark part of my life. And I really wanted to help people the way he had helped me. And so I knew I was going back to school. While I was after I got out of jail, I was in a program called Criminal Justice Ministry. It's a veterans reentry program. And while I was in there, I knew I wanted to go back to school. So that's when I returned to St. Louis Community College at first, got my associates, then transferred to UMSL. And I really wanted to use the stuff that I put myself through to maybe help other people avoid that same path.
Right, something you personally benefited from. Now you're trying to do that yourself.
Right.
And I've heard from other people that social work is really a needed profession right now. Is that right?
Oh yeah, I think it's needed for two reasons, and I think what we're seeing is we're still suffering a lot of the effects of COVID. There was that isolation, and there was a lot of baggage that society's carrying from them. But also, as we get in psychology, we look at some of the long-term effects of trauma, like undiagnosed PTSD, childhood trauma, adverse childhood experiences. We're really seeing how much baggage we carry throughout our life if we don't address those. So that's what I'm taking my social work degree, and I start my master's program next year. And while I do want to do some policy work, which I'm doing now, I'm going to go into clinical work at first and focus on dealing with trauma.
Okay, so that would be like you're helping people who are going through like the hospital to try to get help. Is that, or what exactly would that job look like?
It depends. That's a cool thing about social work. It gives me so many options. That's why instead of going into personal counseling, I pick social work just because it gives me so much lateral movement on what I want to do. So I can either do individual counseling on mental trauma or physical trauma. I could help people, other veterans that are amputated, whether it's from deployment or not, get the resources they need to successfully reintegrate back into life post-amputation. I mean, there's just so many options that I can do. I think what I'm probably going to do is focus with people on emotional trauma.
Okay, and I feel like your past experience, you can check a lot of boxes of why someone ends up having trauma and having to work through that in the first place.
Funny thing is like, I do a lot of reading with there's an addiction specialist that I read a lot of his books and listen to a lot of his podcasts. His name's Gabor Mate, and he says trauma. It's weird, trauma is not what happens to you; it's what happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you. So everybody processes trauma different. Like I was on that call with that little girl with two other paramedics in the back of the ambulance. That neither one of them devolved into substance use disorder after that call. But I just handled it differently. So we all handle trauma differently. And I think sometimes we just need we need somebody else to help us get out of that hole that I put myself in after that.
And so once you got into substances, I think you'd said it was mostly alcohol and also some stimulants too.
Yep.
Along with that.
Yeah.
And so, what's that like when you're in that state? What are the dominoes that start to fall that really impacts your life?
For me, it started, I would go back to that call, I'd get to where I dreaded going to work every day. I didn't want to see anything like that again. I almost became a nihilist, you know, like I couldn't understand like in a universe with a creator how somebody if she would have died like fast, you know, in a car accident or something, I probably maybe have been able to process that a little faster. But I kept on have that visual of her in the high chair choking and that prolonged agony, you know, and it's just when I started going to those thoughts, I was desperate to quiet what was going down in my brain.
Right.
You know, and I knew from a past use of alcohol, like I could shut that up.
Right. It's self-medicating. Is that a good way to
Absolutely.
describe it?
Absolutely. That same doctor I was talking about thinks that all addictions, whether it be drug or alcohol addiction or food or gambling or whatever, he thinks all addictions are maladaptive attempts to soothe unresolved trauma.
Mm. And so, uh, one of the big turning points was that car crash you're talking about in 2017.
Yeah.
That just kind of walk me through that scene. What happened there?
So I don't know. I can't tell you what happened. I know that there was drugs involved. I'd been awake for probably days, and I was driving and drinking at the same time. And I don't know. I don't even remember leaving, but I do remember waking up in a skilled nursing facility 3 months later. I apparently hit a tree doing about 90 miles per hour. Thank goodness it was only a single car accident. I shattered both my legs. Bones were sticking out of both legs. Broke my hip in half. Broke my ribs. They were poked a hole in my lung, collapsed my lung. Broke my sternum. Broke my maxilla. I still got a little bit of a scar right here. I hit my head so hard, my brain swelled so fast that they had to drill a hole in my skull to lose the pressure off. And I was ended up in a coma for 3 months.
Yeah, if you just saw the pictures, you would have thought that there was a fatality in that
Absolutely.
car crash.
And the only thing that saved me, that would have been a third DWI for me, and I would have gone to prison. But they flew me from Cedar Hill, where the accident was at, to Barnes Hospital. And the Jefferson County Sheriffs on the scene asked the medics if I was going to live. And if they said yes, they would have come down and drawn blood on me, and I would have had a third DWI. The medics said no, there's no way he's going to make it.
Yeah, I mean, it was literally like the whole front of the car was just smashed.
Wrapped
Those
around the
pictures you sent
tree.
me, and it's just so. I mean, incredibly lucky to have survived something like that. But you lost part of one of your legs to it.
Correct. I lost. So I shattered my right leg, and it was never healed right. I shattered the leg and the ankle, and so they 2 years later in 2019 they gave me the option of either walking with a brace the rest of my life or having it removed. I was take it off.
Yeah.
It was probably the best choice I've ever made.
Right, because the prosthetic is something you can at least get used to. It was probably really painful.
Yeah, and I just gotta try it. I'm waiting. I got a loaner foot.
Okay.
I've got a new microprocessor digital ankle
Oh wow.
that we're
So,
waiting for my insurance to approve now. So it'll be almost just like having a real foot.
so that's just more mobility on the
Yeah,
ankle.
so I don't have to
Okay.
walk different going up and down stairs or up and down a hill.
There you go.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And your old do you call it a cast? Is that or just the emblem? You had the Marine Corps emblem on your
Yeah.
old one.
Yep.
And you said sometimes people will see that in public or something, assume that you lost it
Right.
on deployment or something like that.
Right.
And one thing that stuck with me that you said was, well, I didn't lose it in a war. It was a war on drugs.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so not a war overseas, war on
Right.
drugs.
That which I deployed for about 20 years straight on.
Right. And I mean, what do you think was missing for you that you couldn't make that jump to take those steps towards sobriety, or at least, maintained sobriety?
A couple of times throughout after that call and that accident, I had been sober for multiple years, a couple of times. But the one thing I've done different this time that's really made the difference was I grew up in a pretty violent and alcoholic home with and a mentally ill mother, and this time I really started going back. Instead of looking at the alcoholism, I started looking at what drove the alcoholism. It Because when I first became a firefighter paramedic, I was a recovering alcoholic. And so I think what truly drove that alcohol was childhood trauma.
Right.
And so I started addressing that through a therapist and work with a program called Adult Children of Alcoholics, which looks at, the survival mechanisms that I developed as a child in order to cope with growing up in a violent alcoholic household.
Mm-hmm. And now since 2019 until now, you've been sober. You haven't drank alcohol.
Correct. Right? Coming up, God willing, which somebody said God's willing for me to be sober another couple of months. On March 29th, I'll have 6 years sober.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Is that a day that you celebrate, like a birthday or something like that?
They do in recovery, and I go to meetings and I announce it. Not for, I'm not really celebrating, but it's important for a newcomer coming in that's got like 10 days in recovery to hear that it's possible. So that's why I go in there and I announce it, just because it gives people that are struggling just to make it to the next day without using drugs or alcohol. It gives them some hope.
Right. Was there a certain point where it was just like the milestones aren't like a big celebration? It's just like, hey, this is my life now, and I'm just gonna embrace it.
Yeah, absolutely. I told you I've been sober for numerous times in the past. And I always set like goals, like once I reach here, I didn't say I was going to drink, but, then, I just set these goals. And once I reach them, I just kind of wander around and get bored, I understand today that like, I got to do this every day. For me, it's like, I heard a guy say it one time, it's a really apt description of what it's like living with alcoholism or a substance use disorder, is that for me, living without drinking or using drugs is like holding my breath underwater. What that means is like I can do it for a while, but like say after 30 seconds, I'm starting to think about taking a breath. If I make it to a minute or a minute and a half, no matter what, even knowing I'm gonna drown, I will take a breath. And that's what happens to me if I use alcohol or drugs. It's gonna kill me. I know it. I mean, I'm already losing body parts, But going to meetings, working a program of recovery is like having a scuba tank. It allows me to breathe underwater. So I've got to, but I can't just fill my air tank and then go swimming 200 miles away from the boat. I got to stay near the boat all the time and come over and recharge that tank a couple times a week.
Yeah. So your path was 12-step.
Correct.
That right? So, what's that process like for somebody? Was it the structure for you that you think really helped? What kind of person would really benefit from 12-step?
A lot of people, the biggest thing for me was reconciling through those 12 steps, was reconciling what I had been in the past, and then also realizing that I don't have to be that way anymore. I could clear up the wreckage of my past, and not have to walk today looking over my shoulders for what's going to catch up for me from what I did 2 years ago. I mean, that's a big thing. So that's the freedom it gives you. And then it also gives you the structure, for me, to do these set things that I have to do every day to ensure that I can make it till bedtime without taking a drink or a drug today. That structure also. But the other thing is the community. I wouldn't say that I isolate, like I hide in recovery, but all my friends are in recovery. Because there's not many places I go to tell somebody that talk about the mindset preceding a drink. They call it the insidious insanity before a drink or a drug. Not many people I could be around with that understand what I'm talking about, but people in that community do. So the community is a big thing. But, you can't just do it. I had to do those steps, the recovery steps.
Yeah.
I always said, I heard somebody say one time, going to meetings and hanging around with people that are in recovery, it's good, but the steps are where you find recovery. So that would be like going to the gym and hanging around a bunch of muscle heads, but not working out and expecting to get big. right?
Right, because you're also big into working out.
Yeah, so anything I can relate to the gym, I can relate
Right, of course, gotta stay fit. And so okay, so social work, and are you gonna graduate soon with your bachelor's?
Yes, I'll graduate May 13th. I walk with my bachelor's.
Wow.
And I just started my application process for graduate school.
And so the next step program is pretty much what made it possible for you to go back to school and like
Absolutely.
really do the thing, and not just get like a certificate or what you might be able to do on your own dime. So,
Right.
what is the next step? What did that do for you in this process?
Like, I get choked up talking about what they did for me. I more so than, and it could be wrong, the money that they gave me for the school opened the door immediately, paid for my whole community college right off the bat, pays a good chunk of my UMSL money. I got other scholarships to be able to establish myself as a student to, be able to graduate with the minimal student debt. But the biggest thing the next step did for me, I started in 2020. Yeah, so only a year into my sobriety, just a little bit over a year. The next step, I had burned so many bridges and lied to so many times and so many people. Anybody that knew me, didn't believe me I was ready to change. And when I was ready to do something different, the next step believed in me and told me, yeah, we believe you. Man, I can't even tell you what that kind of faith and belief in me just, it was unbelievable. It was life-changing. And they've been behind me 100% of the way ever since. I've made some of the greatest friendships with like Darcy and Kevin Elledge, another member of the board, and Ebony, who I introduced, interview with, or Christy Ivory. I mean, it's been incredible. There's just people that, just how it started everything. Just understand that there's redemption out there. I was afraid I was going to live with that pile of shame for the rest of my life. And there's still things I'm ashamed of. You know what I mean? But I do feel like I've redeemed myself.
Right. It's like you have to go forward. You don't really have another choice. It's just about how you actually take those steps. But, and I was, Darcy was kind enough to invite me to the gala last year. And so I got to see, firsthand all these people who are going through the program, and they raised, I think they shattered the previous record of how much they raised.
Blew it away.
Because that's their thing. Like, they have the fundraiser every year. They raise a bunch of money to then give scholarships to people like you. And it was fascinating to see.
It's amazing, amazing program.
And you were the one of the speakers.
Correct.
At the event. There was like probably, what do you think, there was 500 people there?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Were you nervous at all for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, 'cause I've spoken in front of big crowds before, but I had a time limit, so I really, Googled how many words per minute is usually, I ran through, did 5 or 6 dry runs, making sure that I had everything. Didn't want to go over. That's why when I got up there, I introduced myself and I got it, I just
breath,
did that
yeah.
breathe, and I got a little, just let the crowd know I'm nervous,
Yeah.
But yeah, it was an amazing experience.
Yeah, okay. And so after the bachelor's, is there more for you on social
Yeah,
work?
so I got until March 1st. I've already got my letters of recommendation all together. I got to write an essay, and one essay on the effects of discrimination that I've seen throughout my school in social work, and then another essay just on what drove me to be into social work. So one more like of an academic paper that I got to have references and everything, and then one just a personal story. I got to do 2 essays. I got it until March 1st to do them. I love writing anyway, so.
I get the sense that you really like school, which is probably makes it a little easier to
Yes,
go back.
I
Yeah.
really like school.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so is the master's going to be with UMSL as well?
Correct.
Okay, nice.
And what's cool is, so since I'm staying, it doesn't matter where even I went to WashU and Brown School or SLU, since my bachelor's is in social work and I'm staying in the same major for my master's, I get what's called advanced standing. So I can get, usually a master's is 60 hours. I get my master's in 36 hours.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to power through. Like one of the students I was with last year, she paved the way, showed me. I'm going to do 3 12-hour semesters in one school year.
So that's just about full time, right?
It is full time.
Oh, 12 is full time?
Yes,
Oh,
12 is
wow.
considered full time, and I'll do fall, spring, summers.
You know, one thing I definitely wanted to talk about was the criminal justice reform that you're big on. That comes from your own history. Obviously, so many people who have had substance use disorders. You know, you're in a different state of mind. You're more
Right.
likely to, you know, commit a felony. You know,
Correct.
so that's just kind of a lot of people carry that baggage with them, and so kind of tell me the backstory on what your passion is for that.
So my biggest passion with work with the criminal justice ministry is, especially like with this clean slate bill, trying to get people that have usually committed crime, and most of those crimes are fueled by trauma. Like especially crimes of addiction or theft. Usually fueled by the need to fuel your addiction. You know, um, so like when I was testified in front of the Senate last week on the clean slate bill, that's my biggest thing. Is that uh, it, when we treat trauma by inflicting more trauma, we just exacerbate the problem. So if we take somebody that's fueled by substance or that is in active substance use disorder, that is trying to resolve their trauma, instead of being inflicting more trauma on them, we can divert them to a treatment court like St. Louis County did to me, and try to treat the problem that's fueling the crime, not punish the crime itself. Miraculous things happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a dual-fold thing. I'm trying to get diversion more, not just the treatment courts, but maybe even pre-trial diversion. So we're looking at trying to get police involved more with community involvement, in high crime areas.
Mm-hmm.
Just some outreach programs. Then we're looking for treatment court diversion. Looking at maybe different, instead of sending people to the DOC, maybe doing house arrest or something like that, or other kinds of treatment programs. But if we can take these people that are active in substance use disorder and try to treat what's causing them to commit their crime instead of punish the crime, like I said, miraculous things happen.
Right.
And then a lot of these people in treatment courts, I'm one of them, have criminal records from before I was participated in the treatment court that really they can hamstring you for the rest of your life. We got some people, we got a big job shortage nationally right now, Missouri included. We got people with crimes that are decades old that are eligible to work, that could be worked, but are hamstringed by their crime. So the biggest way that I explained this when I was testifying in front of the Senate is that when I was a firefighter in year 2000, I was at Ferguson, and we pulled up on a house that had a working house fire in it. There was a car in the driveway. We probably knew there was somebody home. We made entry in with the hose, and we found an elderly woman in the living room, respiratory arrest due to smoke inhalation. My partner and I dragged her out. We started CPR on the yard. We got her back. We got a heroism award for that, And I say that not to brag, but like today, 25 years later, people don't judge me. I'm not still a hero in society's eyes because of that one greatest thing I've done. You know what I mean? But I am judged 12 years later by the one thing I've done, worst thing I've done as a felon. So I say, if you're not going to judge me for the rest of my life on the one greatest thing I did, and one of the good times of my life, then it's not fair to judge me for the rest of my life on the things I did when I was in the darkest period of my life. We've all changed. I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago. I had 2 legs then, for one thing. But I'm also not the same person I was 12 years ago. We evolve, and I'm asking society and the criminal justice system to judge me on who I am today.
Right. And so the clean slate bill, it's been introduced a couple of times, hasn't passed yet here in Missouri, but basically in layman's terms, like if you have a felony, obviously excluding like the violent, what's
Correct.
considered violent or dangerous, and we can put that in the post whenever we put this, all those that would be excluded. Obviously, first degree murder wouldn't be
Right,
one of the
sexual
eligible,
crimes,
right,
nothing
et cetera,
violent.
et cetera. But for quote unquote nonviolent felonies, after 3 years, it would be automated expungement from your record. So if I went into CaseNet, if you had yours expunged right now, automated, 3 years from now, if I went into CaseNet and searched that, I wouldn't be able to find it. It would be a non-public record.
Correct, it'd
That
be
only,
sealed.
right, that only law enforcement, prosecutors would be able to use if there was like, if you had another pending case,
Exactly
they could
right.
technically use that against you as a past crime that you've committed.
Right, it doesn't erase it from the record. It
Right.
seals it, like we said, basically, so the public can look it up. But if I did fall back into criminal behavior, even 10 years after the expungement, that would still show up on my record. So it's still accessible to prosecutors, and the criminal justice system, but it's not accessible to the public, and especially employers.
All right, do you
Or
know,
housing, that's another big thing is it's not just at employment. So my work in the criminal justice ministry, when we're doing reentry, our two biggest barriers to getting people to successfully reenter are housing and employment. And those are the two biggest barriers. So if we can get them housed in a good place and a good job, their chances of successfully reentering and their rates of recidivism drop drastically.
right.
But they're also our two biggest challenge.
Well, and I just moved places, and most landlords will say, no prior evictions for you to
Correct.
get housing here. I assume having a felony on your record would probably be more frowned upon than having a
Absolutely.
prior eviction. So
Correct.
I can't imagine how hard it would be. And every time an employer is going to do a background check, some might be more willing to accept that or at least entertain it, but a lot of them, that would be an automatic exclaimer.
Absolutely.
That
And
they
they
wouldn't
don't
even,
even have to tell you that's why.
right.
You just don't get a call back.
And so, what would we see as the benefit? Do you think 5-10 years down the road, if some bill like this were to pass in Missouri?
Man, there's so many. So I think we'd see unemployment drop. I know they say that people with their felonies expunged have a 1 year later have a 22% higher chance of having a job, and their wage, or no, 11% higher chance of being back in the workforce, and their wages are 22% higher. So we see, not only do we see extreme benefits for the people who are getting their felonies expunged, but we see the gross domestic product of the state go up because now we got taxpayers. We're lowering the burden of social welfare on these people that are not able to work because of criminal records. They've got their criminal records cleared. Now they're back in the workforce. They're paying taxes. Our gross domestic product go up. Our tax revenue goes up. We make our communities safer. Like I said, one of the biggest indicators of recidivism is lack of housing, lack of job. So we see recidivism go down. We increase the safety of our community by taking these people, instead of keeping them locked into the criminal lifestyle, we give them a second chance. So I mean, the benefits are just overwhelmingly in our favor.
And so, I assume there's probably a general pushback to something like clearing a felony from somebody's record, because I feel like anytime there's a big change like that, and there might be a couple states that do it now, but it seems like people are generally frowned upon, and there's just like idea that that's part of you like forever or something like that.
Right.
I don't know if that's exactly how you would describe it, but what would you say the barrier is to getting that passed right now?
I think that's a big barrier. I think a lot of people don't see that morally it's the right thing to do. For those people that are against it morally, there's so many economic advantages to it. So if you're against it morally, let me appeal to your fiscal responsibility.
I've heard that argument before.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are the fiscal advantages statewide economically to the state gross domestic product are just amazing. So if you're against it morally, you have to be, in order to vote against it, you really have to be against it both financially and morally. And I just can't see, if we appealed both of those, have a hard time voting against it. There's numerous states, and not just the more progressive states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Utah, have all passed it. Indiana, we're seeing Arizona has passed it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a thing in politics called the Overton window. You ever heard of that?
I think you had mentioned it when we talked before.
Yeah. So when a thing enters the realm of discussion, like some things are just outside the Overton window. You can't even talk about them. But so the clean slate is in the Overton window now, which means it's in the realm of discussion. We're seeing numerous states pass it. We're seeing the benefits that they're reaping from passing it. So in Missouri, clean slate is in the Overton window. I think it's just a matter of time now before we pass it.
Okay. And then it's Senator Brian Williams is the sponsor of the bill. Is that correct?
Correct.
Was he the same one who had sponsored it before, or was that?
No, I mean we had I can't remember. I don't remember who was the Senate last year. We had a Republican sponsor.
Okay.
And St. Louis's legislature is overwhelmingly Republican. So we do a little bit better when we have a Republican sponsor. But Brian is like really passionate about it. He is one of our biggest allies at Power Missouri in the Senate. But he did introduce it early this year. I think there's some other versions within the House and the Senate that are getting introduced also. So he's gonna work together with that Republican sponsor to try to get their language to match up and try to get it together as one bill. But Brian Williams did introduce it. I think we've also got, I can't remember. I remember our House sponsor last year was Representative Leckemeyer, I think. But we've got some new sponsors. We got somebody from Springfield area, Republican sponsor this year. So we got like two versions in the House and two versions in the Senate that we need to get everything together and get the language to match up on them so we can get it streamlined and get a higher chance of getting it passed. Like I said, I think it's only a matter of time before it passes.
Yeah. Another question I had was, do you feel like you're getting support from Democrats and Republicans and the more urban areas, the rural areas, but it sounds like there is some motivation broadly to pass something like this.
Yeah, we got a lot of bipartisan support on this. It's fantastic. We don't see many, nationally, we don't see much bipartisan consensus. This is one of the things that there's a lot of bipartisan support for. So it's exciting, to see both parties come together, on what things that, whether they're voting on it for the fiscal advantages or the moral advantages or whatever, it's okay. I'm just excited to see that when it comes to doing the right thing, both parties can work together to get it done. I don't commit myself to one party either way. What I don't like seeing is the gridlock between the parties. It's really cool to see the consensus and work across the aisle that both parties are doing to get this passed.
Yeah, it might be kind of early, but do you get the sense that this year might be the year?
Well, we're surprised that Senate Bill 19 this year, like they filed thousands of bills. I think last year we were, I think the House bill. So this is my first year testifying in front of the Senate.
Okay.
And both years before I testified in front of the House, both personally and professionally.
Okay.
As a reentry case manager and as a fellow myself. But I think last year with the House, it was House Bill 450 something. To get Senate Bill 19, it was unheard of for us to get a hearing this early. We were excited about that, and I was already going to be in Jeff City. So in Power Missouri, we usually get together a bunch of people to testify. They called us up I think it was Wednesday, Friday. They would send out an email like anybody can get down to Jeff City. Well, I was already going to be down in Jeff City having those closed door meetings with the senators and Republicans about DOC oversight and diversion courts. So it just worked out perfect.
Okay. And so the DOC oversight and the other forms of diversion court, that's not a part of Senate Bill 19, right? That's
Senate Bill
separate.
19 stands
so that would
on
have
its
to
own.
be a different bill.
Yes, we've already got some those bills introduced also.
Yeah, the treatment court seemed like it's been gaining more popularity,
Absolutely.
especially with the opioid settlement funds. Some
Yeah.
municipalities have chosen to put more money towards that. So it'd be really interesting to see, could that be expanded, or how well is it working right now with just treatment?
Yeah, so we're at Empower Missouri. We're just now deciding to get into the diversion court. That's one of the initiatives we decided. So we're still in the research phase. So I don't have the numbers. That's a big thing. Anytime before we go to the House or the Senate, we have to have our research on point. We have to have it absolutely on point, because if we go in with the wrong numbers, we lose all trust and all credibility.
Right.
So right now with diversion courts, we're in the research phase.
Is there anything else that you think I missed that you wanted to touch on?
No, I think that was it hit a lot of just really good points. I think the biggest thing that drove me to this thing was like just to use these experiences to help other people. Maybe get out of the hole I was in. Was it's not so much about redemption. It is like I'm looking for redemption because I was a lot of shame. But the biggest thing was I hurt my kids pretty bad with my addiction, And one of the promises in Alcoholics Anonymous is no matter how far down we will not regret the passion we should do on it. I'll always regret the pain I caused my kids. But as part of my recovery, I've really dove into Stoic philosophy and the 4 virtues of wisdom, self-moderation, courage, and justice. Like I don't know if I can ever justify or find justice for them. The only way that I can ever be okay, actually not even if I'm okay, I always regret the pain I caused them. But if I can show them that the pain they went through coping with me and my addiction is helping other people, it brings some justice to what I put them through. That's my driving cause today. I want my kids to feel like what they went through had a purpose.
Are you able to have a relationship with your kids now?
Unbelievable. I didn't talk to my daughter, so I'm 6 years, coming up on 6 years sober. I didn't talk to my daughter until 4.5 years into my sobriety. Wow. We were really close for years. She felt betrayed when I relapsed, and just I understood. I understood. I betrayed that trust, and it took 4.5 years of me doing the right thing for her to trust me again. And I thank goodness that I have that trust back.
What advice would you give to somebody who's trying to do that, who has kids, who's been through a similar situation as you? You got to be persistent with it.
Persistent. I gave her a space the whole time. So I can't control whether she accepts me back in her life. I knew I could never do that. It's a big part of the dichotomy of control in stoicism and in recovery. They talk about the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, wisdom to know the difference. I knew I had no control over whether she accepted me back into her life. What I did have a control over is whether or not I kept giving her solid evidence of why it would be a good idea to let me back into her life. So that's what I concentrated the whole time. Not on whether she let me back home, but whether I kept on doing the things that would prove to her that I was worthy of being back in her life. Mm. It took a lot longer than I wanted it to, but I understood, and our relationship at today is absolutely incredible.
Yep. Well, you're a living example of what you can do if you turn your life around. So
thank you.
It's always great to talk to people who have those stories to tell, because
thank you.
A lot of other people do. So and it's
yeah,
just fascinating.
I'm no anomaly by any means. There's every one of us that are in recovery are miracles.
Thanks for listening and watching Backstory STL. We'll release new episodes every Wednesday. Check it out on the First Alert 4 app or wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.